Couple questions we get very regularly are first, okay, if I get my offer accepted, what's the first thing I do? What happens next? And another question we get very regularly, much earlier in the process, is okay, if I'm writing an offer, what should I do about contingencies? So it kind of makes sense to tackle both these questions together. So the first one's pretty easy to answer. The first thing you do if you get an offer accepted is you put in what's called an earnest money deposit, an EMD. So earnest money deposit is, think of it as skin in the game. That's 3% of the purchase price here in the Bay Area. And within 24 hours of getting your offer accepted, you're typically going to wire that money into escrow. You can also do a cashier's check, but most people wire the money. So here's where that plays in with contingencies. A contingency is basically a way out of an offer if something doesn't quite go your way. Your offer is contingent on something happening subsequent to the offer being accepted. So the three most common contingencies that you see, albeit much less here in the Bay Area than other markets in the country, slower, less competitive markets, are a loan contingency, an appraisal contingency, and a property or an inspection contingency. All right, so let's talk about each of those. A loan contingency is when you're saying, hey, I'm offering contingent on my lender coming through and approving my loan. So you'll typically, if you write a loan contingency, that's something you're going to do if you only have a pre-approval letter. It's not something you really need to do if you have underwritten pre-approval, which means your file's already gone through the underwriter. Your loan is basically pretty close to approved already. And certainly if you have cash approval and you're making a cash offer, then there's no need for a loan contingency because there's not a loan. But that's basically what it is. If for some reason you're not confident that your lender is going to perform and your file hasn't already gone through underwriting, then you can offer with a loan contingency, which basically means that if the lender doesn't do what's needed of them in the period of the contingency, again, usually somewhere between 10 to 14 days, you can back out and get that 3% back. An appraisal contingency is another one you typically see. So when someone's buying a house with a loan, the bank is going to order an appraisal. They're going to have an independent third party come out, and that person is going to give a value of what they think the property is worth. So sometimes, not too often, but sometimes the appraisal will come in less than the actual contract price. Usually not much less, but sometimes a little less. With an appraisal contingency, what that is an opportunity to back out of the deal if the appraised value comes in below the contract value. And the third type of contingency you typically see is a inspection contingency, sometimes also called a property contingency. It's an opportunity to come in within a set period of time, usually a week to 10 days, and hire contractors, hire inspectors to do your own inspections, just really to kind of get a look under the hood of the house and make sure that you're comfortable with it. If there are material defects that weren't known to you before that the inspection contingency or that the inspector brings to light, that's an opportunity to negotiate a lower price, request repairs, or even back out of the deal. So the reason why it makes sense of talking about contingencies kind of in conjunction with the earnest money deposit is once all contingencies are released, that earnest money it's at risk. So if you as the buyer of a property don't perform, theoretically the seller could hold on to that 3% or escrow could hold on to that 3%. It's tougher to get it back. So a contingency is an opportunity to get that back if the terms of releasing the contingency, either the appraisal being where you want it to be, your lender performing, or the inspections being clean enough where you're comfortable to buy the house and move into it, where those things are satisfied. Now, here's the thing. It's very, very rare, at least on competitive homes where there's a lot of buyer circling, which is the majority. It's very rare where you're going to see contingencies in our market. Ryan and I, we've sold quite a handful of homes, and I'd say 95% of the offers we've received. And on some homes, we've received in excess of 30 offers. 95% of those offers don't have a single contingency. So you're probably thinking, particularly if you're used to dealing with real estate in a different market, my gosh, isn't that risky? How do people get away with that? Well, there's ways to mitigate risk with each of these contingencies. So let's talk about the inspection contingency first. Our market's a little unique. I'd say over 90% of the homes that you're going to look at already have inspections in hand. That means the seller or the seller's representative has hired inspection company or companies typically to conduct a roof inspection, a home inspection, and a pest inspection. And a pest inspection is much more than just a pest inspection. It's basically an inspection of the wood in the home. So wood destroying organisms, fungus, dry rot, termites. We have termites in the Bay Area. You're going to get a look to see, just how much Section 1, which is more serious damage, or Section 2 damage there is. Roof inspection is an inspection of the roof. It gives you an idea how much life's left on the roof. And then a home inspection looks at a bunch of different things just to see to what degree the home is compliant with California building code. When Ryan and I are looking at a home inspection, we don't really care too much about everything in there. The things that we care most passionately about are certainly the condition of the foundation, the condition of the plumbing, and the condition of the electrical in the house. So the more major systems, followed by the condition of the HVAC, central heating and air, or what type of system it has, and maybe the water heater. The things that are more costly to fix if something goes wrong. So you very rarely see inspection contingencies in our market, simply because there's a fresh set of inspections by an unbiased, detached third party. Now, the sellers aren't being generous by paying that $800 to $1,000 for those 3 inspections. Their reason for paying that money is very simply because they don't want to get in the back and forth of negotiating repairs. They say, hey, open kimono, here's everything that's good with the house, and here's everything that's bad with the house per a licensed third-party inspector. So it's basically, that money is an investment to get more non-contingent offers, and less contingencies means more of a sure thing and a better chance that the home is going to close on time. So that's frankly probably the most important one in most other markets, because your 3% is in the hands of someone else to do their job. In this case, a lender, a processor, and an underwriter. So how do you mitigate the risk of leaving things at the mercy of the lending team, of your lender? Well, you mitigate that by getting underwritten up front, or if it's a really competitive house, getting cash approved. So by going a few steps beyond just getting a pre-approval letter, but letting them take another week, 10 days to really fully underwrite your file, to verify your employment, verify everything that they would have to verify once the house is in contract, once you're in escrow. By doing that heavy lifting up front, it makes for a much quicker and much less stressful escrow period. So that's the best way to mitigate that. And frankly, it's also going to give you a better chance of getting your offer accepted, because you're more of a sure thing in the eyes of the seller and their representative. And when it comes to an appraisal contingency, again, if there's going to be multiple offers on a home and the majority of those offers say, hey, we're going to buy the home, if it appraises a little bit low, we're just prepared to make up the difference. We're planning on putting 20% down. Well, maybe we're putting 21, 22% down if it appraises a little bit low. And then there's one offer with an appraisal contingency. Do you think that offer is going to get as strong of a look as the offers without contingencies? More likely than not, probably not. So the way to really mitigate the need for an appraisal contingency is to really do our homework, really do a thorough broker price opinion or a comparative market analysis, which is something we do very regularly, just to really get a feel for, look at the same factors that an appraiser is going to look for and say, hey, here's where we think the house should appraise if based off of what very similar homes with similar characteristics are selling for in similar market conditions. By doing that, we can usually get pretty close to where we think the house is ultimately going to sell. And I mean, in the last 70 or so homes we've sold, I think we've had one that's appraised low. So it's a risk, but it's a very, very low risk. And all it means, if you do have a house that appraises a little low, is it means you just are putting a little more down payment, which means you have a little more equity in the house to start off with than you anticipated. So that's where EMD comes in. It's the first thing that you put in once your offer's accepted, and that's kind of how an EMD works in conjunction with contingencies, because contingencies are a way to get your EMD back. Once the EMD goes in, once all contingencies are released, then you close. And in 21 to 25 days, depending on the lending situation, the house is yours and you're wiring the rest of your down payment and moving into your new home.